Welcome. With us today, I have Amber from Idaho. Amber, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me today.
So, Amber, tell us where you are in your homeschooling journey.
So, I might be a little bit different than some of your other guests. I am on the other end of homeschooling. So, all of my kids have graduated from high school. I have two that have graduated from college and three that are seeking degrees right now. So,
Awesome. Wow. I can't imagine what that must feel like. It must be very bittersweet.
I'm
Um,
sorry, broke up.
oh, okay. Sorry. It must be very bittersweet looking at, just this bond that you had with them and being with them every single day and kind of not having that anymore, or it's different at least.
It is different. I love mentoring homeschool families, so I still keep my fingers in everything. And now I have two grandbabies, and so I feel like I'm starting the cycle over, which is really fun.
Oh, that is good. That is really nice to hear. So,
Yeah.
what even got you into homeschooling in the first place? Because it's kind of like had a big boom right now because people kind of see after COVID. I didn't like what was going on. And over the last couple years with different vaccine requirements in certain states. So, I can understand, why we have the boom going on now. But what brought you into the homeschooling world way back when you started?
Yeah, a long time ago, actually. So, it's a little interesting. That was not my original plan. I planned to just put my kids in school. And in fact, I put my oldest in preschool. I did the same thing that everybody else was doing that lived around me. I chose a preschool, stuck her in there, and she seemed to have a good experience. And then I sent her to kindergarten, and it was kind of a different world. She wasn't very happy there. We had lots of tears in the morning and in the evening, and she didn't really like to talk to anyone. And I don't fault the teacher. We were living in Las Vegas at the time, and this poor kindergarten teacher had 30 kids in the morning and 30 kids in the afternoon and no aid.
Wow.
And I tried to be in there as much as I could as a mom, but it was challenging for sure. And so it was actually my husband that came home and he said, "I think we should homeschool." And I was like, "What are you thinking?" Like, that had never even crossed my mind.
Yeah.
And I was pregnant with our fourth child. And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if I can do that." And he's like, "I think you need to think about it." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll think about it." And I took a whole year. I put her in first grade. That really wasn't any better. There was like double kids in there. It was tight, tight, tight. And I read everything I could find, and um, and then I said, "Yeah, this is what we need to do." And so I pulled her. She came home in second grade. I had a kindergartner, a 3-year old, and a 1-year old, and that's
Wow.
when we started our homeschooling journey. So
Were there any other people in your area doing this at the time? And it's not like you could just hop on Facebook and find a local group. How did you even find people that were homeschooling?
exactly. It wasn't like that at all. And I didn't know very many at all. And
Yeah.
so I really felt alone. And there were several moms that were not happy with me, to be honest. And they're like, "This is the biggest mistake you'll ever make." And the funny thing is some of those very vocal moms came back several years later and said, "This is what I need to do with my child. Can you help me now?" And
Wow.
so it was good for us. But I networked a lot, and I was able to find other moms and families that were doing the same thing, and we were able to build a community that really benefited and helped my children and our family.
Oh,
So
that's awesome. And that was in Las Vegas?
that was where we started, was in Las Vegas.
Okay. And what did your family think at the time? Like, did you have
um
parents or siblings of
yes,
your
I had
own?
parents, siblings, and it wasn't for them, and nobody else decided to do it, but they did support me.
Oh,
They
good.
said, okay, if this is what you want to do, we support you in what you decide to do. So I appreciate them.
Yeah, because I imagine, I mean, even today, it's, you know, even as popular as homeschooling is, there are still people like, your kids will be weird. So I can't even imagine back in like the 80s and 90s starting doing it. I can't, the
Yeah.
pushback you must have gotten from people. Now, where did you even go with like curriculum? Did they have multiple curriculums or was it just like, here's your homeschooling curriculum, this is it?
Yeah. It was a little bit different back then. There wasn't the internet like it is now. And so there was a company called, and it's still around, it's called Rainbow Resources.
Okay.
They've always sold a lot of curriculum, and they would mail me a catalog that was huge. It's like the size of Moby Dick, right? And I would flip through that. That was my nightly reading. And I would flip through that, read all of the reviews and everything that was there, and choose curriculum from there. But I
Did you
pieced a lot of things together. They didn't have as many options as they have now.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's almost worse with so many options because parents are left like super overwhelmed. I know for myself, it was like, what do I
Mhm.
even do? There's so many different avenues I could take that I feel like whatever I choose is going to be the wrong one. And that's where it was kind of nice coming into contact with Katie Berry that I had a episode on episode 4, and I did an Instagram live with her as well about what curriculum to choose for my son and why. And we went over
Yeah.
like what each one is. So if anybody wants to check that out, it is saved to my Instagram page. Because I kind of said, this is what this curriculum does. This is what this one goes over. This is what this one goes over. But it is so overwhelming. And Katie kind of broke it down nicely. She was like, there's no bad curriculum. If they made it this far, like it's just what works for you and your family. And I still think that's hard
Yeah.
because a lot of times
Mhm.
you don't like you wouldn't know if the curriculum works for you or not until you've dabbled in it a little bit, right? And by that
Right.
point, you spent the money.
Yeah.
Do you have advice?
Absolutely. And I think the best curriculum is the one you'll use.
Hmm.
So a curriculum that you buy that sits on the shelf isn't helpful. And I love curriculum. That's like my thing. And in fact, I've worked as a curriculum, specialist for several years, and I've dabbled in so many different ones that I have a good sense of a lot of them, even the newer ones. But like Katie Berry, I love when new homeschooling families reach out to someone who's done it, because they might even have examples that you can look at. I often tell people that I counsel for curriculum that I'm like a wedding dress owner. Like I've had three, daughters that have gotten married. And when I go into a wedding shop, there are hundreds and hundreds of dresses. And I have this lady that we work with, and she looks at my daughter and she says, "What is your dream dress?" And then she explains it. And then she pulls out like seven and says, "Okay, look at these. Tell me what you like and what you don't like." And within an hour, we've like narrowed it down to the most beautiful, perfect dress. And that is the experience you can have when you work with someone that has been a couple of years ahead of you in the
Okay.
homeschooling world, right? And they can help you narrow those down, and help you prevent wasted money as well.
Yeah. What Katie had me pick was Haggerty for phonics, like an extra component to the regular reading.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and then for reading, she had me get All About Reading, and for math, The Good and the Beautiful. And that's all I do, just those three things, and kind of sing a months of the year and days of the week song and kind of look at a
Yeah,
calendar. And that's all I've started with. We are 4 weeks in.
that's
I started
perfect.
over the summer, although when this comes out, I don't know. We might be into the fall, but um, I like it. I like the curriculum. I've noticed that like the first couple of weeks was so hard to get my son to transition into like this is our new way of doing things. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
pushback, a lot of like me blowing up and yelling at him or bribing him with things. And we did a prize chart, and they seem to work. But now that we've done 4 weeks, he's gotten better knowing that like this is just the way our days go now. 4 days a week I do it so that I
Mm-hmm.
can do it through the summer and take, weeks off here or there if someone's sick or whatnot. Um, but to the people who are just starting out, like it does get better. And I'm only 4 weeks in. I mean, I know that's so kind of ignorant to even say, but just from week 1 to week 5, it has gotten so much easier. Where I didn't think, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do this. In fact, a couple times I go, I'm calling the school. You'll be going there in September.
Yeah.
But did you
Well, I
have that
think that's
experience
a
with your kids?
yes, and I do think that's a good rule of thumb is not to give up on anything like at least for a month because you just need that practice and that, and that change. But yes, I did have that experience frequently. And one thing I love to tell families is when you're having those bad days and things don't seem like they're going well at all, and just like you said, I'm calling the school, that doesn't mean you've made the wrong choice.
Okay.
Because homeschooling is hard. It is, but it is so rewarding.
Yeah.
And there are things that you can get out of homeschooling that that honestly you can't get any other way. And so when those hard days come, it's okay to recognize that that's part of it and it will get better and you can pivot and change. And one thing that, like, if I could tell myself, if I could go back and tell myself again, right, that being a mom comes first
Hmm.
and the academics come second.
Okay.
And
All right.
sometimes it's really hard. It's really easy to get wrapped up in the academics. Like, I don't want to fail you and I don't want to not teach you everything you need to know. And this is my responsibility. And it feels really heavy.
Yes.
But your relationship with your child is absolutely top, it's the most important thing. And so we don't ever want those academics to shadow that relationship with your child. And so sometimes it's okay to take a step back
Hmm.
and go slower. And if you dial into, okay, we're going to start school and it's going to look like this on day 1 and
Hmm.
it falls apart, that's okay.
Hmm.
Be like, okay, we're going to take it one step at a time.
Hmm.
We're just going to have a small morning routine for the next week and a half. And then we'll add something else to that. And then we'll add something else to that. And really gently move into this homeschooling experience so that that relationship with mom is still there. Does that make
I'm
sense?
glad that you said that because especially with social media now and Instagram and all that, you can so you pick your curriculum, right? And that's one thing. And like I said, she told me to do
Mm-hmm.
like a phonics and a reading and a math. Okay, so those are the basic skills, but then you see these other people that are homeschool moms that have been doing it for years and they're selling products like for instance Pam Barnhill, the Your Morning Basket, and I'm having her on the show soon too. um and it's like, well, this sounds wonderful. And then Treehouse Schoolhouse, and they have a beautiful Bible thing, and all the and a connected Christmas, and all these things that sound so wonderful, and you're like, I want to do it all. But before you know it, you are
Right.
drowning in curriculum, and then you're overwhelmed and your kids are
Mm-hmm.
bored with it because it's so much. And so you made a good point. You start out very slow, and then if you feel that you can add in something else, or even take a break from one thing and do a connected Christmas or that sort of stuff
Right.
where you're not overwhelmed. And that's something, yeah, I have definitely felt like there's so many things. And the Tuttle twins, I love their stuff, and I want to add that in. And it's like, but then it's
Hmm.
so much that we definitely have to take a step back and think about, okay, well, what are the
Hmm.
bare essentials that we need? And then when we're okay with that, we'll
Right.
add in little bits. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and you can take things in seasons as well, right? So you can say, okay, for the next 6 weeks, what is it that I want to focus on? And that will be my goal for the next 6 weeks. And then I will reevaluate, right? So maybe it is an immersion into the Tuttle Twin, American history or their other books or videos. We're going to focus on that for the next 6 weeks. And then I'm going to reevaluate, and we're going to have this connective Christmas during the next 6 weeks. And so it doesn't have to be add, 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 add. It can
Mm.
be this is the focus for this 6 weeks. And then we're going to pivot and focus on something else for the next 6 weeks. You
Oh, I
might still
really
have
like that.
that base, right? Of like, okay, we're still going to have math and language arts, but I'm going to pivot and focus differently every 6 weeks.
Yeah, and especially when you're doing it at home, you're not spending 6 hours a day doing this stuff. So if it's only an hour or an hour and a half, you do have that leeway to take things out, put things in, even if you are taking out phonics, something essential, but
Right.
it's just for a little bit of time, and then you'll be putting it back in, and
Right.
that's really cool. How, let's see. So, what did your days look like with four young kids and homeschooling? I know this is a big question for me before I actually started homeschooling. So, 4 weeks and before, and even still, it's like I have a kindergarten, like a 5-year old. So, homeschooling a 5-year old is very different than homeschooling middle school and high school kids. So, what was a day in your life? What did it actually look like?
Yeah, so I ended up with 5 kids.
Oh my
So it
goodness.
was
That's right. I forgot to ask you in
pretty,
the beginning. I'm sorry.
yeah, that's okay. Um, so when they were little, it was busy. It was very busy, and I was pretty structured. They just thrived off of that type of structure where, we got up at the same time, and then I would rotate kids. So one kid would be in charge of a little kid while I worked with an older kid, and another child was doing independent work. And so we kind of did this rotation where everybody got a turn with mom, everybody got a turn with the baby, everybody got a turn doing independent work. And we kind of just rotated that. I also had like toy bins that were daily. Like there was a Monday bin and a Tuesday bin and a Wednesday bin. So those toys only came out once a week, and they only came out
Oh,
during school hours.
I love
So
it.
they were exciting and new, things like that. When we started, we were living in Las Vegas and we had a pool. So there was a definite reward once everything was done. The kids were in the pool by the afternoon, really worked off a lot of that energy. And we had an evening routine as well. So dinner and baths, we had read aloud, scripture, those types of things that brought us together again as a family. And so it wasn't like, okay, school hours, this, right? It was a way of life that
Mm.
we processed through and that we enjoyed together. And that's another piece of advice I would throw out that I had a problem with is I would plan too far in advance. It just ends up falling apart. So, you might have this 6 week overview, but like 2 weeks max is probably the most you should schedule out because things come up, somebody gets sick, there's a doctor's appointment, those kinds of things. And so just trying to be a little fluid with your routine. And I like to almost call them rhythms instead of a routine, where we have
Okay.
a rhythm of our day. So it's not necessarily we're up at this time, we're doing math at 9, we're doing language arts at 10. It's more of this rhythm of we're going to get up, then we're going to do breakfast, then we're doing reading, and then we're doing, and so it rhythms into what goes next, but it's not so rigid as far as like time.
And then where did you find time to even cook for five and yourself? And if your husband was home and, breakfast, lunch, sometimes when you're cooking breakfast and by the time you clean up, it's time to get lunch prepared again. And then you clean up and it's time to get dinner ready again. How do you even fit that on top of
Yeah,
laundry and vacuuming and grocery
right.
shopping into your day? Did you have tricks?
Yeah. So what I did is when we ate breakfast, while the kids were eating breakfast, I packed lunches in lunch sacks and I made dinner. And so I either put dinner in a crock pot or I put it into some kind of casserole type of thing, stuck it in the fridge. But then I cleaned the kitchen and I was done until dinner. So the kids could eat their lunch sacks whenever they wanted. So they could get their own snacks. They could have lunch when they wanted. And then dinner was already ready to put in the oven at dinner time. I taught my kids how to do a lot of the housework. So they all knew how to do their own laundry right around like between, I started teaching them around 8. And then everyone had a zone that they had to clean every day. So if they were the family room, they had to clean up the family room. If they were the schoolroom, they had to clean up the schoolroom. And so right around like 5 o'clock, as I was putting dinner in, everybody had to go around and clean their own zones. And then we always cleaned as a family on Saturday as well. So
Oh, that's awesome. And did your kids have a lot of outside friends? Did they do, I mean, sports would be hard with five.
yeah. No, they all did they usually did some kind of musical thing. So they took piano lessons, some learned the violin, some learned the flute. Um, they did dance. Almost all of my kids did dance or gymnastics. And they all kind of learned a skill too, like a trade. So sewing or teaching piano. One child learned how to code on the computer,
Oh, wow.
things like that.
Oh, that's so cool.
So we did a lot of stuff outside of the home. But we were done with school in the early afternoon.
And I'm going back to like even dinner. Okay, so you would make it at breakfast time. Did you have like Mondays we always eat this, Tuesdays we always eat this?
Sometimes I did that. It kind of like, I didn't always like the same thing, but I did
Mhm.
meal plan ahead of time.
Yeah.
So I would meal plan ahead of time, grocery shop, so I had the food that I needed.
I
I
find it
used
hard
my
to even
crock pot a
find
lot.
like seven different meals. And I didn't grow up in a house that cooked a lot. There's like so many meats and my husband's not really into
Yeah.
pasta too much. So it's I wouldn't know how to feed that
We
many people.
did lots of soups. We did a lot of barbecue. We did a lot of tacos and,
Mhm.
those kinds of things too.
Oh, awesome. So, getting back to the curriculum, now with technology, there's a lot coming out that is online curriculum. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, for me personally, I think there's a lot of advantages for certain subjects, but I wouldn't necessarily put all of the subjects online for my
Hmm.
kids. So I really love the math because it's when you are trying to teach multiple children, that's one subject where it can be very adaptive to their level, and it's grading them and teaching them how to do it and moving them at a pace that works for them. So if I was doing it now, I would definitely consider a math online program for each of my kids. There's a lot of things that I can do as a group, like history and science, which I'd love to do all together. But that math definitely needs to be leveled to their grade. And so I think online math is brilliant and wonderful now. But I do think there are a lot of resources out there, and you would just need to find what works best for your family.
Yeah. And I had read, or maybe I heard it on a podcast recently, and I made a Instagram post about it, how, so I had always thought, like, even for just screen time, oh, we don't want our kids to have a lot of screen time, if any, because of, being sedentary. They should be out moving. And another reason being, they're putting messages, subliminal messages, or even right in your face messages to the kids. And if the parents aren't there, we're unaware that they're getting these messages. But thirdly, I heard on the podcast how the switching of all the screens is actually like a dopamine hit. And in a developing young brain, their brain is getting trained to expect that dopamine hit. Kind of like every time you look at your phone, you're looking for a dopamine hit by either, a text
Mhm.
message or notification that someone did something, liked a comment or whatever of yours. So I never thought of it from that aspect before, of just the even playing video games or watching TV. The more a screen changes, the more their brain is getting used to that. And when they're looking at, say, the in a school, the chalkboard, or even reading a book,
Mhm.
they're not getting those dopamine hits. So if they're used to that, it can almost give an anxiety. I guess I never thought
Mhm.
about that, and that is so profound. When we think it's just these little, like, oh, he can
Yeah.
sit for a few minutes, and I'm guilty of it too. We don't do a lot of it, but yeah, I never thought of it in that aspect before.
Yeah. And I, I have heard about that as well. And it's definitely a concern, which I think um, is even more important for families and parents to teach children how to use technology
Mm,
appropriately and to be able to regulate their use of it.
mm,
And so I think there's a balance there
yeah,
between I don't want screens for my kids and too much screens for my kids. I think there needs to be a balance where there's an opportunity for you to teach and and provide rules and things like that so that they don't leave the home without that knowledge and
right.
then spiral down once they have access to it. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
because that's what I worry about too. Okay, we'll say we don't have any screens in the house at all, and then once he leaves the home, say he leaves at 18, it's going to be, so overwhelming. We've all seen
Mhm.
those people in college that were hidden under a rock, and they get out
Right.
there and they're drinking and they're partying like crazy because they haven't experienced anything. So it is finding that fine line. And like you said,
Mhm.
regulating ourselves, because how many of us adults really know how to use technology wisely? You know, Probably
Right.
very
And
few.
this is a different, right. Like, and for me in particular, I was raising a generation in technology with technology I did not have. And
Yeah,
so that was a very different thing I was trying to navigate. Where
yeah,
my kids, they have cell phones, they have those smartphones. And so now they're raising kids that also have them. But my generation, it was challenging because we
yeah,
didn't grow up with any of that.
right.
And we really have had to learn to navigate it. And you still have to, right? Because the technology continues to change. And
Yes.
so just trying to stay one step ahead of it and be able to teach it.
Yeah, it's hard. I never used Instagram before the podcast, but that's kind of how they tell you to market podcasts. So it's like I'm still try, trying to you stay afloat with that. And it's so funny because people, they'll send you ads for, oh, can we edit your podcast for you? Can we? And I'm like, no, can you teach me how to use Instagram though? Like I have the editing stuff
Yeah,
down. I can tap, but I don't know how to use Instagram. So that's
I'm
been the,
learning too. I
yeah.
just started an Instagram account as well. It's called Storybook Umbrella and just, sharing my love of homeschooling and books and things like that. But it is a new avenue that I am learning as well. And my kids are helping me.
Oh, see, mine are too young for that. And my nieces and nephews pretend that they don't use it so that they don't have to teach me. So, ah,
Yeah,
yeah, I'll one day it'll all click, but I'm chugging
it
along.
will work. Yeah.
And I'll have to make sure to follow you. I knew that that was your email address. I didn't realize you had the Instagram
Hmm.
account. So what sort of stuff do you provide on Instagram for Storybook Umbrella?
Yeah, so I offer different book ideas and I'll take one book and then give you ideas on how to use it like in reading and math and science and history and those kinds of things. Homeschooling support, teacher support, that
Oh,
I'm
awesome.
growing. I'm figuring it out. But it's
Yeah, no,
fun.
that's
So it's a new avenue for me to share the things that I love.
yeah. Can you do one off the top of your head, like right now where we read Brown Bear last night? Like what would be an example of something you
Yeah. So I would learn about colors and matching colors for math. I would learn about different animals, habitats. I would learn, let's see, brown bear. I could probably find a poem that would go with some of the animals that you would go with. I'd
okay.
also try to find some fine art that would also highlight some of those animals that you could put in. Let me think. What else could I do? Definitely poetry, rhyming, repeating words, those kinds of things.
I have to say, I'm not sure that I did an ounce of poetry in my 12, 13, 14, 15, 17 years of schooling. Maybe it was like trickled in. I don't think I ever did. But it's
Hmm.
so big and prevalent in the homeschooling community. And there must be a reason. Can you like enlighten me on that? Like, why is poetry important?
Well, I think poetry is important because it is the beauty of language. And not only can you hear it, but you can see it in the description. And there is a lot of benefit from learning to memorize as well. And
Okay.
so poetry is such a natural way of building your memory and
Okay.
learning how to memorize that I think it is also helpful. I also think memorizing poetry, things that can help them in life, they'll come back to you.
Okay.
So, my dear grandpa, who did pass away several years ago, he learned poetry when he was young. And even in his 90s, he could recite those poems to us
Oh,
and
wow.
teach us what he had learned from that poetry. And so I think parts of language and memory.
Okay.
So I think it's
I
great.
do remember learning a haiku. So I can't say I didn't learn it at all.
Yeah.
I do remember that part. Um, and yeah, we were reading, I think from the Read Aloud Revival book list, we were reading the Winnie the Pooh poetry book, which here I am thinking it's just an actual like chapter book. And I opened it up and I was like, oh, all right, I guess we're reading poems. But my son really liked them and I was surprised. And, they were very fun to
Yeah.
read. So I'm happy that there is a deeper meaning. I knew I was missing
Yeah.
something.
Well,
Now,
I'm sure there's more to it than what I can articulate, but
do you think your kids were they happy being homeschooled now that they're older and looking back on life?
yes, I think they enjoyed it and they appreciated that opportunity. And I know most, they're definitely thinking about homeschooling their own kids. So I think it's something that will continue.
Well, now that it's popular, they have to. Why do you think why do you think that homeschooling has become so much bigger over I mean, when you started homeschooling, it was probably just after it became like legal. It wasn't even legal in a lot of states or the country in what the
That's true.
80s?
Yeah. 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 So I started closer in the 90s.
Okay.
And but I think COVID did really give homeschooling a push
Mhm.
because it was an opportunity where kids were forced home and parents had an opportunity to practice, right? To really see if they liked
Yeah.
it. And I think a lot of parents were surprised by how much they enjoyed it. And so I really do think that was part of the boom of it. I think people homeschool for all different kinds of reasons, right? There's just a myriad of reasons that bring their children home. But I think what keeps children home is that parents find how much they enjoy their children. They enjoy the opportunity to spend time with them, to teach them the things that they love and that they want to instill in their kids.
Yeah, when I started the podcast, I was always under the impression that by each grade, there's a certain amount of things that a child should know or needs to know. I shouldn't say should, needs to know. By each grade, they have to
Mm-hmm.
know this. By this grade, they have to know that. And since starting the podcast, it's like an unspoken rule. Like there's nothing they need to know by any age. Surprise! It's totally up to
Nice.
you. you,
Mm-hmm.
and as the parents homeschooling, you want to give them the most that you absolutely can. But I think that might take the pressure off a little bit that no, they don't have to know. I mean, look at when I was in third grade, we had to know cursive by third grade. Well, clearly that's changed. So it's more just the things that they have to know in the schools, that's for other reasons, funding and test scores and whatnot. But in the grand
Mm-hmm.
scheme of life, they don't have to know anything by any amount of age. Like you said, you teach them the things that you love, and then you see where their loves are and explore further in
Yeah.
that. And, that is just so eye opening to realize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And looking back, I kind of at the beginning when I was talking, it sometimes it feels heavy that you're responsible for that. But when I recognized that my job or my responsibility wasn't to give them all the knowledge that they needed, my responsibility was to teach them to love to learn and how to learn
Mm-hmm.
so that if they want to know something, they have the tools to teach themselves how to do that. And if I can do that, then they will have all the information and the knowledge that they need to accomplish their mission in life. And that's what's important. I remember
Absolutely.
this funny story about my son. He was in front of a computer like over and over again, and it actually was really irritating me. And I'm like, why are you always on the computer? And finally, one day I had it, and I'm like, that is enough. Get off the computer, go outside. You can't possibly be doing anything on that computer that's good. And I'm like, what are you doing anyway? And he's like, well, I'm teaching myself how to code. And I'm like, oh, that's actually probably a good skill. And so I
It's a
let
lot
him
better than
teach
what
himself
most
how to code.
teenagers are doing on the computer in their room, I'll tell you
Yeah,
that.
exactly. But he's actually a really good coder now
Oh
and a
my
skill that he
gosh.
can use and has been paid for to use. And so, but I'd given him the tools to have a desire to learn things and the ability to teach himself. And that is what's most important. And that's what you're trying to create and
Absolutely.
offer your children.
How do you think your life would be different if you never homeschooled?
Oh, that is a hard question because it has been so much a part of my life and my heart that it would be different. It would be very different. Two things that stand out to me that I know for sure my life would be different. One, I think the relationships with my family would be different. It just takes time to develop those relationships. And homeschooling gave us more time to develop those relationships. The other is my own learning, my own love of books and learning, and the things that I learned in the experience of teaching my children. I would not have that if I hadn't homeschooled. So those are the two that I know stand right out of being different.
Yeah, and I'm at the part in my homeschooling life where, I've done kind of what society said for the last 15 years. I've worked in government work and, worked my way up and had my second child and just took an extended leave. And I keep saying to myself, like, can I really leave a job? But it's taken probably a good 2 or 3 years since I started even thinking about it, or well, since they started masking, yeah, a solid 2 years, because when they started masking 3-year-olds in New York is when we took them out of daycare. And that's when I said, well, I got to figure something else out, because if I don't like the way the school is making us parent our kids, then we have to, not put our kids in a place that we don't, agree with. So, really coming to this realization that, like, moms aren't really supposed to be at an office all day long. And not to put that down, I did it for 15 years. My son was in daycare, but it's like they train you, society trains you to think that that's the right path. And most people, when you say, I'm thinking of leaving government work, they think you're crazy. And what about your pension? And, just the health insurance stuff. It's really sad that society has trained women, especially, to think that this is normal and to not be with your kids all day. And I know that there's any variation, right? But I'm just saying, and like, I've fallen for it. I'm not trying to say people shouldn't do it or put anyone down that does do it, but it's just, we have been trained to think that's normal. And if you go back just 50 years, 1 to 2 generations, they would think you're crazy to leave your kids in someone else's care at 6 weeks old, let alone go back 100 years or 200 years or 2,000 years. I mean, it's only so recent that we think being in an office all day long with someone else with our kids the majority of the week is normal. I don't have a question. I just think it's crazy.
Well, I'm very grateful that I was in a position where I could stay home and be with my kids all the day.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that.
For the people that tell me I'm going to regret it because of the way my pension will be affected, I think, I don't think on my deathbed I'm going to say I wish I spent more time at a cubicle.
Right. Yep. Those relationships are the most important and the most valuable. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity if you can, to spend that time with your family.
And do you have any advice as we kind of roll into the 45-minute mark here? It's crazy how fast these chats go. But since you are on the other side of it, what would you tell moms like me that are, on the brink of leaving a career and doing this thing that we never thought we would do? What's your advice?
I think I've mentioned it a little bit throughout this, but my advice would be to always put mom first. Be a mom first before you're the teacher second. There was an experience I had early on when I was homeschooling, and I was struggling with one of my kids, and we were knocking heads about something. And I went into the laundry room and I called my husband at work, and I was in tears, and I'm like, I just don't know if I can do this. And I remember he told me, he said, Amber, your relationship with the kids isn't worth it. So either figure it out or send them back to school. And that hit me really hard. And so I said, I committed then, I'm going to figure this out. And I'm going to make sure that my relationship with my children is the most important. Because if they learn everything and don't have a relationship with me, then to me, that would be a failure.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's hard to not get caught up in the panic of it all. And yet, that's what's most important. And it's little by little. Your children will learn drop by drop, not a flood, just drop by drop. And know that those little moments every day will add up to something amazing.
I love that. And I've already seen little bits of that too. As you know, we were reading a book yesterday, and my son looks at a word and goes, ah, and he's trying to sound out the word accused. It was like such
So
a
cute.
proud moment, you know.
Yeah.
But do you have advice what to do in the actual moment when you're butting the heads, when you are putting mom first?
Yeah. So, couple of things I would recommend. One, take a break. You might just need a break. And make sure that you are putting into place moments where you can break. Be creative about that. Like if that means you and your best friend that's also homeschooling, you swap one day a week and you get a couple of hours, you want to make sure that you have time to regenerate your own well, right? And then two, this was something I learned, is to ask why.
Oh,
Why does your child feel this way? What is it that I am not providing that's causing this? You know, what is it that they're really trying to tell you or that they really need? And sometimes I was really surprised by those responses. Just a funny story, actually. One of my kids was very upset and got really mad. And then I asked why, and they were upset that they didn't get school lunch because they didn't go to school. So we got some trays. I gave them $1 at the beginning of the day. They paid me, the lunch lady. They went through the line at the kitchen, in the kitchen, and we did this for like a week, and it totally filled their bucket, and that's just what they needed.
wow.
And so sometimes we just need to ask why and help them learn how to communicate that to us. So
Oh, that is beautiful. Yeah, because we don't, when, especially as moms, we've got so many things balancing on our head, our shoulders, our head, everything that, yeah, you don't sit there and think, well, let me just ask him why he's reacting this way or she's reacting that way. I mean, my daughter's one. I can already see she's going to be a handful where I'm going to be asking why a lot. So, and it's
yeah,
genuinely asking. I mean, sometimes I'll be like, "Why are you acting like
right.
this?" You have to
Yeah,
come back and say, and like you said, you got to help them get there because a lot of times
right,
we act a certain way and we don't even know why. So that's really
right.
beautiful. I love that. I will definitely I'll be writing that one down, stealing that for an Instagram post. No, I'll be writing it down so I can look at it all the time. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure we touch base on? You gave some great
I
advice.
think we've talked a lot about good stuff, so
Yeah, I am
I think
definitely
we're
going to
good. But
be.
I would just encourage, if you're feeling the pull, to take the leap. because when I started homeschooling, I literally felt like I was taking my children by the arm. I was stepping to the edge of a cliff and I was about to leap with them.
Yeah, that is
But
how
it
it
wasn't
feels.
until I took the leap that I realized we had been given wings. And you can do it.
Yeah.
You can do it. There's community, there's support. And if you feel that pull and desire, I just invite you to try.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I love it. Thank you so much for meeting with us today. You have had such valuable
Thank you.
information and advice, and I will try to even jot a lot of it down to put into the show notes just because I feel like a lot of this needs to be written down. And if anyone wants to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Storybook Umbrella, and you can find me at storybookumbrella.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amber. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
All right.